My name is Patty Brescian, and really appreciate you all being here today, and thank you for those of you who are on Zoom and, who are here with us today. Tonight, Richmond Racial Equities Public Safety Forum is going to focus on understanding injustices immigrants and foreign students face and how we as a community can help these folks. Many thanks to the members of the Richmond Congregational Church for sharing their space tonight. Jared Katz, right here, is a Richmond resident, a therapist, a former select board member, and I'm thank you so much, Jared, for agreeing to be our moderator tonight. Richmond Racial Equity is a group of Richmond residents that gathered after the murder of George Floyd in May of 2020. We wanted to learn about and discuss racism in Vermont and to see what we could do to bring about positive change. We are happy with our accomplishments and know we have lots of work to do. Please consider joining us by writing your email at the bottom of the survey that you got on the way in. We'll begin with a land acknowledgement by Emily.
If you're on Zoom, could you please mute yourself? Thank you. Although the sentiments, I understand. The name of this poem is called Beyond Thank You for the Real Estate. And it's an excerpt of a longer poem written by Cash Ahenekue, who holds a Canadian Research Chair in Indigenous Peoples Well-Being and is the Associate Professor in the Department of Education at the University of British Columbia in Canada. Thank you for the real estate. When you acknowledge the land, please center those who have not forgotten its sacredness and who have paid a high price for honoring their obligations towards it. We ask you to take a moment to remember the genocides and ecocides that have happened on the land and to the people of the land. We don't want you to feel shame or guilt for being a settler. We invite you to feel motivated and responsible for interrupting ongoing harm and continuous violence towards the land, towards Indigenous peoples, towards your own body, which is also land. We ask you to use the platforms available to you that upholds our inherent rights of self-governance and of meaningful consultation about what happens in Indigenous territories. We ask you to affirm your responsibilities towards the land back movement, the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people, and the suffering of families and communities whose children lie in unmarked graves on residential school sites. We ask you to notice and to interrupt the effects of colonial violence on Indigenous bodies, tirelessly experiencing racism in healthcare, education, in places of employment, in courtrooms, in prisons, and while doing basic errands like shopping for groceries and banking. We ask you to notice and to interrupt the effects of colonialism in the disproportionate representation of Indigenous peoples, in statistics about homelessness, school attrition, unemployment, illness, the opioid crisis, imprisonment, self-harm, and amongst those who have decided this is too much to bear. We ask you to not stop at an acknowledgement, however thoughtful they may be, and to remember the intergenerational burdens that are carried by Indigenous nations as the cost of the promises of your bright, safe, and innocent future in this place we call America today. To have our stolen lands returned, our systems of self-governance and treaties recognized, and our livelihoods restored. Without making this about you, we ask you to recognize and support the efforts of the land to keep all of the human and non-human beings alive, despite the ongoing disrespect, neglect, and destruction carried out in the name of progress, development, and civilization. Please take a minute to sit with the weight of the responsibility we have asked you to embrace in this poem. I thought that went really well with what we're talking about tonight. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Patty, for helping me get this stuff together. And thanks to Gretchen Paulson and Marshall Paulson. Gretchen for doing this technical stuff over here and Marshall for figuring out all of this microphone stuff over here. If I'm not leaning into the mic far enough, someone's going to tell me that I'm not leaning into the mic far enough. All of you need to do the same thing over here when you're speaking. I am Jared Katz. I've never moderated anything of this sort before. So forgive me as I moderate this tonight. Some introductions, if I might. We have our very own Sergeant Matt Cohen from Richmond Police Department with Officer Duke here, who is tuckered out and doing exactly what he ought to be doing right now. And to his left, we have Will Lambeck. And I'm going to let each of these people introduce themselves thoroughly in just a moment. I just figured I would give a brief introduction at this point. Will, who is from Migrant Justice. Christina, I'm sorry, I'm going to go over to Wafik over here. Wafik forward. I'm going to let you introduce yourself as well. I have the pleasure of having known Wafik for a very long time and
Tell the story. Go ahead.
I'll tell the story. Once upon a time, and far, far away, I wore a uniform, not dissimilar from Matt's. And I got to do lots of things in the very few years that I was a police officer. The thing that I am really most in love with as a memory was the day that someone walked into the office who needed to have his fingerprints taken for his citizenship. And that was what he, and it's been an absolute treat for me every time I run into him, which is infrequent and wonderful time. So
Maybe you don't remember. The day I got the citizenship, I went to celebrate on Church Street and he was sitting on Lunix Cafe. So he's the first one I saw.
And it was it was a thrilling meeting for me.
Yes.
It's one of the few times that I've been, the fingerprinting day was one of the few times I was brought to tears in uniform. And I was brought to tears again seeing you on Church Street. It was lovely. It's a really cool feeling for me. Anyway, moving right along.
No special stories.
No special stories.
That's very
This is the first time I've ever met Christina before. But I'm allowed to introduce Christina, but with her name, Christina Dalton. And I'm going to, at this point, ask you folks to say a little bit about who you are, why you're here, maybe what you're feeling about what's going on. And then we're going to, actually, before I do that, many of you have pieces of paper or pencils and something to write on, and I will encourage you to write down questions come up for you as we go along, whatever those questions might be, comments that you might have. And then once we've gotten some introductions done, we'll open it up and get some questions. And to the viewers at home, the same applies. Make some notes. I think we'll have somebody who's going to be able to read the questions. Gretchen, thank you. And we'll get the questions. I'm told that I should repeat the questions into the microphone when they are asked from the audience, unless everyone wants to get up and grab the microphone, and I'll repeat the questions to the best of my ability and tell me if I get it wrong. So, Matt, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Yeah, so I'm Sergeant Matthew Cohen. I'm with the Richmond Police Department. I have been down here in Richmond for almost a year now, coming up in June. Prior to that, I had 13 plus years in Williston as a police officer and serving their communities. My role in our community, obviously, is to keep everyone safe. And then beyond that, make sure that people who interact with us in the police department feel safe, that they can come to us with their concerns and not have those concerns lead them to consequences if they are here in different capacities. I don't know how else a better way to put it.
Hi, thank you very much, Richmond Racial Equity, for putting this on. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to those who are on Zoom. Looking forward to spending the evening together. My name again is Will Lambeck. I'm part of the staff team, Migrant Justice, which is a grassroots organization based in Vermont, founded and led by the community of immigrant farm workers. in this state. Migrant Justice organizes for human rights and economic justice, and over the years has grown to include farm workers in neighboring states, visiting farms in New York and New Hampshire and Maine. And then also our membership has diversified to include immigrant families, not only living and working on dairy farms, but those in other economic sectors in the state, and primarily in the past 2 years, seen the large increase in immigrant workers working in construction in Vermont, including some who live here in Richmond. So I think that'll be the intro for now.
I start by saying Assalamu alaikum. In Arabic, it means peace be with you. And my name is Wafiq Faour. I born in Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. Both my parents born in Palestine in Upper Galilee. They became refugees when the Israeli state became created. They were not allowed to go back. I am activist all my life. I am part of Vermont for Justice in Palestine, which is we are member of Vermont Coalition for Palestinian Liberation. We work with other organizations. We work with WELL and many other organizations. I am happy to be among my neighbors and my friends, and I'm happy to see you all. And I'm happy to see you too. Go ahead.
I'm Christina Dottelin, and I work for the Champlain Valley School District as a, we used to be called DEI coaches, and now we are called Student and Community Engagement Learning Facilitators. It's a very, very long thing. And I am not a Vermonter. I came from Illinois and have been here about 15 years. And I have worked at Spalding High School in Barrie. I've worked all over the state and have been in this district for almost 10 years now. And I spend a lot of time thinking about justice and thinking about equity and making sure that every single one of the students in my schools feels like they belong and that they're safe. And so with the current administration and the changes that have taken place, making sure that my students feel like they belong and like they're safe has taken on a new meaning for me. And so tonight, I plan to talk a little bit more about some of the outreach and mutual aid we've been doing for students in our school district and their families, and just how that really changes a community. When you learn that a kindergartner is being deported from your school, that really changes things. And so that's sort of why I'm here today, is because I've sort of taken on that role for our school district.
All right, thank you all for your introductions. At the risk of opening it up immediately to questions, I'm going to open it up. Patty has something in mind here.
I was wondering if each of your participants could talk about the issue of tonight, which is our foreign students and our immigrants, and special things that they are working on. Each of these folks are working. Will's has some folks that have been jailed. Wafiq can speak to students. And so I wonder if they could speak a little bit about that. What's been going on locally in Vermont to our neighbors?
So there have been some recent, I just heard on Vermont Public on my way over tonight about the deportations of and each of the farm workers arrested in the Northwest who were sent to Mexico. And each of you has a different viewpoint on this, and one other that I won't prompt that. I'll let it come up. So I don't know if you want to go in reverse order since we started Yeah, one way, do you want to just go backwards?
Sure. Yeah, so I would say that we made a conscious effort at our school district through a lot of pushing, and hopefully my boss never watches this video. But when I learned that 2 of our high school students were leaving the country, because they were part of that order that said that anyone here on a parole visa from Nicaragua, Cuba, Haiti, and etc. had to leave. A couple of my students had to leave, and these are students who their first day in the country, I helped register them at CVU, and I also know the family that they lived here with. And I know that the superintendent of Winooski has gone public that they are his family members, and I obviously work with him. And to me, Wilmer, the superintendent at Winooski, has been on the front lines in education in this state, sticking his neck out to protect students and families. And here's this man who is doing everything for his community, and no one knows this is happening to his own family. And so I worked together with a colleague who I work with closely on these sort of issues, and we wrote an op-ed letter. And then I got to thinking, like, what's that gonna do? There's like you all probably have written a number of op letters because you're very involved citizens. No one's gonna read that from like random CVU teachers. So I went to the superintendent. I said, I need you to do this. Like, I need you to do this for the state of Vermont. I need you to do this for these kids. And we went back and forth, and we got Wilmer's consent and the students' consent, and he sent it out. And when Adam Bunting sends things out across the state, people pay attention to it. Like, he has that privilege, and I used it because I wanted to. And so Adam sent this out, and the communities around the state were flabbergasted. This has been happening for weeks, but schools hadn't talked about it publicly. Families were too scared to talk about it publicly. So that was sort of the rallying cry across the state that, like, yes, we know these college students and these activists have been arrested, but no one knows it's literally our kids, right? The weekend before, the Saturday before, everyone's rallying in Montpelier, everyone's holding signs everywhere, and they're protesting, and no one knows it's actually happening right here to our children. And so we sent out the call. We publicized it as much as we could because CVSD has power, right? We are a wealthy school district. If we can lead this charge, hopefully others can follow us. And so that's the decision we made to take. And what we then did is we worked privately with the family to make the accommodations they needed. We held an early graduation ceremony. We had a reception afterwards. We really tried to make their last amount of time here special. But what I really want to talk about is we did all those things and the community really reached out, but a lot of people place value judgments on the decisions of these families. Families are choosing to self-deport, and that's not ours to judge. We don't get to say, we can take them to Canada, we can hide people in our basements, we can do this, we can do that. We don't get to make these decisions for them. We sit in a place of privilege, okay? And the fact of the matter is, as we have seen in the news, folks who are being deported are being sent to random countries and separated from their children. And no one has a right to judge a family for making that choice. So what we need to do, and what we are going to continue as a school district, is to explain what mutual aid is. People don't realize it. People are great at fundraising, they're great at volunteering, but people don't understand that mutual aid, that means no strings attached. You don't get to ask us what we're doing with the money. You don't get to tell us, oh, I'll donate money, but are they here legally? Because I'm not going to donate unless they're here legally. So my job over the next months is helping people understand mutual aid And if we put out the call for money, it means a family really needs it. The kindergartner in Shelburne, their family really, really needed that money. As you probably are aware, people go into a significant amount of debt to get here. And then they have to buy their plane ticket back when they face deportation. Now you're talking about a 5-year-old and an 18-month-old, okay? That's expensive and it's traumatizing. So we raised cash, we got suitcases full of clothes for the kids, and we got airplane activities. Because I don't know about you, I have 4 kids, okay? They're older now, but like the thought of an 18-month-old and a 5-year-old on a 4-segment flight back home for like 24 hours, like that's a nightmare, right? So I was like, pack it with snacks, pack it with toys. Like, we got to give these kids something to do so the mom is not pulling her hair out. But the Shelburne community rallied. It was amazing. We raised the money we needed. We got the suitcases, we got the toys, we got the clothes. But we need a system. We can't be reactionary every single time. We have to create systems that when we have new Americans coming in, we're supporting them. When we have new Americans who have to leave or immigrants who have to leave, we have to support them. And there needs to be a better system in place. And so we're actually meeting, Wilmer is coming over next week to meet with our leadership team in our district because they have like a rapid response incoming, outcoming team that we're gonna try to model ours off of. So that's basically what I've been doing with my entire life the last 30 days. And it's awful, but you know what? My kids get to come home every night and I know where they are. And for me, anytime I get a nasty email that tells me, well, are these kids here legally? Maybe they shouldn't be here anyway. Why are they overstaying their visas? Because reading comprehension is like really problematic these days. It just makes me know that like, if there's not people like us who are willing to do these things, we're lost. And we have to understand community and we have to understand mutual aid. And that's just like my biggest push right now is like, these are our kids. It doesn't matter how long they've been here. These are our kids. And to treat them otherwise is a travesty.
Again, my name is Wafiq, I'm Palestinian. So if I want to talk about the condition of the Palestinians, it will take hours and hours to discuss it with you. But what we are trying to do here, and what is the crime of the Palestinians who are getting arrested lately, is very simple. Is to bring Palestine and educate the American. It is a local issue. There is no suffering in Palestine. There is no poverty in Palestine. There is no hatred in Palestine. If United States stop supporting the occupation, if United States stop supporting the genocide, if the United States and its president doesn't call for ethnic cleansing of Palestine, we will be fine. United States is part of the problem over there. So us over here, we're trying just to relate to the American this story. What's happening to my parents? What happened to my brothers? So for the last 18 months, with this genocide going on and on and on, the American public in general reacted very well to that, and the leaders or the future leaders of the American reacted on campuses, in college campuses, and they did what they're supposed to do, which is doing encampment to educate the public of what's happening over there, to bring attention to what's happening over there. And among them, they are Arab, Muslim, Palestinian students from all over, plus American, Jewish and non-Jewish. They were part of this encampment. And I recommend everybody to go and see the documentary about Columbia University, the encampment in Montpelier, the 17th of this month, on the Montpelier, Savoy. The thing is, United States to react instead of understanding the situation and be proud of this generation of people that they are reacting to what happened over there. They did the opposite exactly under the pressure of the Israeli lobby. They start changing all the rules of colleges and universities and adopting a Zionist definition to the anti-Semitism, which is us as Palestinian Arab. We are against all sort of racism and anti-Semitism, all of it. And we all, as a community, we should keep our eye open to that. But to say, or if I wear kufiya or carry my Palestinian flag or saying I am Palestinian, it becomes anti-Semitic. Because Israel never recognized the word Palestine or Palestinians. And if you go to the history of Israel-Palestine issue, they never even declared one time a war against Palestinians. Arab-Israeli war, PLO Israeli war, Hamas Israeli war. They never said the word Palestine or Palestinians, ever, ever. So we are not existence for them, which is basically, this is what they told the whole world for 77 years coming May 15. 77 years, they said a land with no people for people with no land, you know, and the European and the American did that. Now our students getting picked up one after another. We have people with F1 visa, which is a student visa. Their visa have been revoked. We are, and it is not strange that here in Vermont, we have two major cases. One with F1 visa, because passed by Vermont, Romaiza, and Mohsen, which is a friend of mine for 7 years, you know, he has a green card, you know. Over a sudden, United States of America, it changed, and the State Department, yes, we have the right to revoke even the green card. Why? The excuse of Rubio, the Secretary of State, that Mohsen, this guy who living in southern Vermont, on Upper Valley, Vermont, is danger to the beanstalk. What a joke. What a joke. One person, he is extremely peaceful. Extremely peaceful. He is endangering the United States peace talk. And guess what? What so-called peace talks for the last 30 years, non-existence. Because the Palestinians are talking to United States and Israel, and United States are playing as the middle person while they are sending weapons, billions of dollars, building settlements on a land we're supposed to talk about. The United States is part of the problem. And Vermont is part of it, as you see. We are putting people in jail over there. There are 4 students in Middlebury, they lost their F1 visa. Thousands of students over sudden, they are scared to lose their status here, you know. They are canceling them left and right. And this is the beginning, it's not the end. If they succeed in any of these courts, Mahmoud Khalil from Columbia University, or Mohsen Mahdawi, or Romaiza also, if we lose any of those states, you are talking thousands of people going to be deported. And they will go farther to people who neutralize, like me, you know, through Jerry. I'm going to lose my status. Why? Because it happened in England and they are following the same way. The Israeli lobby is strong over here, and the list of those students who are losing their visas or Mahmoud, Mohsen, and Muraiza. They didn't come from the State Department as some newspaper telling you. It came from two organizations, Canary Mission, which is Zionist organization, and Bitar. Because those two organizations actually sending messages to our students threatening them, you are next. Mohsen went to hiding. He asked his college, Columbia, to give him housing to hide there because he has been haunted. Columbia University refused. The same when Muraiza, I mean, what did she do? She co-wrote an article. She became a threat to the national security of United States. To the national security, because you're under the Constitution, everybody, it is the First Amendment protect the people, not the citizen, the people in the United States. And I guess we are all people. Racism existed, discrimination existed, and otherization of people existed. So I will tell you further. My own daughter in Middlebury College 3 years ago, because she organized Students for Justice in Palestine, she'd been hunted by Canary Mission, and her video is all over the place. You know what does it mean to a person to be hunted and called anti-Semitic and cutting the video and the way they talk and making video for them? They will lose jobs. Many lost their jobs. They will lose any acceptance for colleges. 2, accepting the Zionist definition of anti-Semitism. It doesn't only hurt us. A lot of the students in Columbia who lost their seats, have been expelled, are Jewish students. And in a big number. Why? Because 27% of Columbia students are Jews. And the biggest chunk of Solidarity of Palestine on SJP or Jewish Voice for Peace are Jewish. 2, the laws they brought up, and the judge here in Burlington brought it up just recently for Mohsen Mahdawi. I was inside the court when he asked them, these laws are McCarthy era laws. We study it here in the colleges. What is McCarthy era? You know, now they are using it on Palestinian Solidarity Group. So for you, yes, you have in your shoulders a mission. You have to do that. You know, it's your problem too. And I say it again, and frankly, I'm not going to stop saying it. Your money killing us. Your taxes going to Israel in the shape of weapons, or taking our houses, land, and building settlements for European going over there. Has nothing to do with religion. Nothing Palestine has to do with it. 70% of Israel are atheists anyway, according to polls in Yedaot Ahranot and Haaretz. Those are Israeli newspaper, not my newspaper. So I will take any question. Sorry. I don't have
So yeah, the moment we're in right now is bleak. It's a very difficult moment, and yeah, I think building off of what Feek's points a little bit, it would be very convenient to lay this on the feet of the Trump administration and to say that this is a new issue that we're facing, but unfortunately that's not the case. Just like the Biden's administration's dismantling of the student encampments, using this, weaponizing this bogus charge of anti-Semitism, laid the groundwork for the Trump administration's attempted deportation of student activists. Previous Democratic administrations' criminalization of immigrants and capitulation to right-wing talking points has laid the groundwork for the mass deportations that we're seeing right now. Just like there's a bipartisan consensus in Washington around funding and defending Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people, there's been a bipartisan consensus for decades around the criminalization and deportation of immigrants. So the building blocks of what we're seeing right now aren't coming out of nowhere. These aren't something that's totally unique to the Trump administration. And at the same time, we are certainly seeing an intensification of attacks against immigrant communities in many different ways. So over the past 100 days, we at Migrant Justice have been receiving multiple calls a week of people who are in detention, who are being detained by ICE and Border Patrol in the state of Vermont. This is happening in our state on a regular basis. People are being detained and separated from their families, and many of them have been deported. The most high-profile cases of the detentions of Vermont immigrants in the past couple of weeks have come the April 21st Border Patrol arrest of 8 farm workers on a farm in Franklin County, Vermont. Armed agents using this very flimsy pretext of a citizen tip of 2 people walking with a backpack came onto a farm, terrorized farm workers, chasing them through the barns, and ultimately pulling people out of their homes and detaining 8. Just 10 days prior to that, on April 9th, Border Patrol pulled over and detained Arbe Lopez, another member of the farm worker community, who was actually driving to that same farm to deliver groceries to the farm workers. He was pulled out of his car and detained and was in detention. And as you mentioned, just this afternoon, 3 of those farm workers were deported and have arrived in Mexico. The deportation of the workers today is horrific and is a real blow to the community. But 5 of those farm workers, as well as Arbe Lopez, are still in detention, and we're continuing to fight for their release. An action that everybody can take tonight is to sign petitions calling for the release of those workers and an end to their deportations. I think those petitions are going to be shared on the Zoom right now, and I'm going to pass around some flyers with QR codes that folks can scan to sign the petitions. That demonstration of public support is incredibly important for the eventual bond hearings that these detained farm workers will receive as demonstration of their community ties. It's been really tremendous to see the outpouring of support from people. Thousands have signed these petitions. Hundreds marched in the streets of Burlington in an emergency rally days after the detention. And then last Thursday on May Day, International Workers' Day, thousands marched to the ICE office in Williston calling for the release of the farm workers. This is a great and really, honestly, a heartwarming show of solidarity from Vermont neighbors. It's not enough. We need to keep fighting and keep taking action for their release. So responding to arrests as they happen and fighting for the release of detained immigrants is incredibly important. It's not enough just to be responsive. Over the past 15 years, Migrant Justice has led struggles to make Vermont a more welcoming place for immigrants and has really been tremendously successful in doing that. And the quality of life that immigrants have in the state right now compared to 2 decades ago is really night and day. When Migrant Justice first began organizing, organizers would go to farms and encounter farm workers who hadn't left the farm for months or even years at a time. Literally, they were dropped off there. They live and work on the farm. Groceries are dropped off every 2 weeks. And that was the extent of their lives. And over the years, that same community of farm workers has fought to expand their rights and to gain access to the rights and benefits that others take for granted, whether it's access to driver's licenses, whether it's access to higher education, whether it's access to healthcare or access to housing. I'm very excited to say that an initiative this year in the Vermont State House to expand access to housing for immigrant families in Vermont and to do away with discriminatory barriers that people of different immigration statuses face to accessing housing, has passed out of committee and is on its way to passage. We hope that it'll pass this year, and that Vermont will become a state where immigration status and citizenship status are included among the protected classes of the state's fair housing and public accommodations law. So we're very pleased to see that moving forward, but it's not done yet. So we encourage everybody to speak with your representatives and senators, and most importantly, to communicate to Governor Scott that you want housing access for immigrant families, and it's now known as S-127 is the bill that it's been added into. So please show your support for housing access for immigrant families at S-127. And then finally, speaking about policy regarding immigration, here in Vermont, we have somewhat limited impact on what we can do for federal policy at the moment. But what we can do is ensure that state resources and state personnel are not going to be in the business of mass deportation. And so over the past decade plus, Migrant Justice has led campaigns to ensure that all police departments in the state have fair and impartial policing policies in place that prohibit discrimination against immigrant communities and prevent law enforcement agencies from collaborating with or acting like federal immigration agencies or federal deportation agencies. There's a lot of work yet to be done to ensure that all agencies have the strongest version of those fair and impartial policing policies possible, and that they're fully enforced. But we've made a lot of progress as a state to get police out of the business of deportations. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to speak more and question and answer.
That's a great segue into me to policing. So Will brought up, I mean, everyone has brought up really traumatic situations that have been happening to our community members. And my job is obviously our public safety and community safety. Part of that is it revolves out to everybody in our community. It doesn't matter the immigration status or who they are. When people need to come forward to our police department, either they witnessed a crime, they're a victim of a crime, I want them to feel comfortable and safe to be able to come forward and report that to us in the Richmond Police. Now, go into that. We do have a fair and impartial policing policy. I'll shorten it to FIPP. There's a vibrant history of the FIPP in Richmond, going past prior to what became a state mandate. The town of Richmond had worked with Migrant Justice to come up with a FIPP policy that was in place last year. I believe the statewide mandate went through with a model policy that went forward. And since then, even the town of Richmond has worked with Migrant Justice to adjust even that model policy to strengthen that FIPP policy to include more people so they feel safer coming to us. We fall under that policy. Our officers fall within that policy. So when we go forward, the real basic version of that policy, if I really broke it down, it's much more complicated, but really basic version, unless there's a court order, police officers can't ignore. We can't just ignore a court order, but unless there's a court order, we are letting the federal government do their part separately. We're not involved with what they are doing, and we are working as our own separate entity. So we're not helping out with the deportations, the detainments, those type of issues that come forward in policing. That's the federal government's job, and we're going to leave it to them if they want to enforce those laws and policies. That's their job and their laws. We're going to focus on our community and what our community laws and state laws are, and we want to make sure that those people who are in our community can feel safe when they come forward if they are a victim of a crime or they witness a crime. And so, you know, we do have a very, I think, strong balance in our fair and impartial policy that allows people to come forward and feel safe. And I kind of just one thing that I can kind of plug in as we go forward, back some history in policing, it was fairly common practice that law enforcement would rely on, local law enforcement would rely on federal government agents for translation services. That's out of our, we're not allowed to do that. We're not going to do that anymore. And so now we're trying to backfill on our end, those translation services. How do we backfill some of that? And what's been great as technology has improved, using apps like Google Translate, using things like that to allow communication between people who are of different languages have been amazing and a great tool to use. The only caveat to that, they're not accepted yet in our court system. So we don't have that. If there's a legal question now, we don't have that caveat. We still have to get a license translated to it when we go through a legal process and with individuals with different languages. So I'd hope that we can maybe push a little bit, if I have this group, to push a little bit of that, allowing some of that technology in translation services to be utilized more often. It will save everyone money because I have an app that I could use rather than having to hire a translator for different purposes. And new technology that's been coming forward is the newer body cameras are utilizing AI. And those AI can actually have in-person translation services going back and forth on scene. So I could use my body camera and it will read and listen to our conversation with somebody and translate different languages. That technology is just coming out. Like, so Axon just came out with that technology, and I just got an email saying this technology is now available in our newest cameras. We're not there yet. Obviously, here we have to upgrade cameras, but that's a future thing. But that technology is coming, which is good for us to know as community members that when that technology comes, we want to utilize it so we keep everyone safe.
I just wanted to follow up on Will saying like things to advocate for and follow up on his point that like, yeah, our federal elected officials, like we all know what side they're on. We all know what they're doing. And Will's right. It's not going to impact much right now. But one of the things we were really advocating for in our communication to our communities is that there are a number of states across the country that have deportation defense funds. And Vermont is not one of those states. And we did get some good feedback from Chittenden County senators about it and Mike Pishak, the state treasurer. So along with Will's suggestion about the housing, that's something that can be pushed on because studies show, I mean, obviously before the current administration, but studies show that access to legal representation, obviously those deportation cases have much better outcomes. And the fact of the matter is many families cannot afford representation. So I just wanted to plug that when we're trying to talk to local officials, that's another really needed financial system in our state as we have a growing immigrant population.
Thank you all very much. I've got a lot of questions, and I imagine some of you have got some questions too. And I got a hand up over here.
I just
With a-
want to introduce myself. Hi.
Oh,
I know.
must be Stephanie.
I didn't want to interrupt anybody.
Well, now that you're here,
Yes,
please
thank you.
come introduce yourself and
Extend the chair. Yes.
So I'm Stephanie Sleeper and my title has not been changed. I'm still equity and inclusion coach at MMU. And we have one other person in the district who works at the K-8 level. I'm just here to really to learn from what's happened at CBU and at Winooski. I know Wilmer and I know the work that he's doing there is so important and really valued. And we haven't had an issue in our district yet that has affected our students, but I do see the need to really have that collaboration and community across the state because it's not just going to be CBU. So I can, maybe answer questions that people have about MMU's response. Our superintendent, John Alberghini, put out some information following that event about kind of MMU's policies but it's new to us, right? So this is not something that we really had to deal with before, and it's awful and terrifying, but I think we have solidarity, I hope.
but before we take questions, Stephanie, I wonder if you could say a little bit about from your perspective, you have a hands-on right up front.
I
front
do.
seat to what's going on in the school. Can
Yeah,
you say a little bit about what, maybe what student reaction is to all of this, or?
I would say student reaction, just in general, we have a number of students that are really involved in social justice. We have a student action club that's been, working on some issues, especially in regard to Palestine. There are students who are concerned, and are worried and want to know what they can do with, as 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And so, one of the things that I talk to them about is, that raising awareness with their peers, because there are a number of their peers that are 15 and they're interested in getting driver's licenses, and they don't necessarily pay attention beyond their world, and they're lucky enough to not have to in a lot of ways. And so making sure that their peers know what's happening to their to other students in Vermont, to people around the world, people in Palestine. Yeah.
You should note, Stephanie and I are aware of this, that like schools do not ask immigration status.
Correct.
Since the 1980s, the Supreme Court ruled that every child in this country is owed an education regardless of their status. And so one of the biggest challenges we face is that it's hard to be prepared for a family situation when we actually don't know who is and isn't of legal status. And so that's something that hampers our ability to be proactive, because we don't actually know, and we're definitely not going to ask, especially now. But I think some people maybe don't understand that, like, we don't know legal status of our families. We don't ask, and that could potentially be changing. The Tennessee legislature is trying to make it that only American citizens can go to public schools. And obviously, we hope that doesn't get into the court system or happen, but it really complicates our work and knowing which kids we need to support, because we don't know.
Yeah, it's good that I don't know,
Yeah.
because then if someone from immigration enforcement comes and asks me about a student, I can truthfully say that I don't know their immigration status, and I treat all my students the same. They're all my students, so.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think it's time to do some questions, and I saw a hand up here. I don't know if you have a question. If you feel comfortable saying your name, I'd encourage you to say your name, and if you'd rather not, that's okay too.
That's okay. I still have my birth certificate from Iowa, so. I'm just leaving that corner. My name's Jane Miller. I live in Jonesville, and sorry, I have a couple of things I want to mention and ask about, but just for quick context, I have taught at Dartmouth and Millbury, both of those schools, where at a time when foreign students or international students were not at risk. Okay, it's kind of shocking to me to hear that they are at this point. But now I teach part-time at CCV, Community College of Vermont, and a goodly number of my students in English, my background's in Russian, but I teach an English composition course at CCV. And a goodly number of students in my courses, I don't know their status, I don't ask unless they tell me themselves in their essay. But I am very concerned about what's going to happen with them. Because at least a third of the students in the last course I taught were perhaps born in the States, or were adopted, or have dual citizenship. And what's also rather frightening is that many of them are students at high schools. So if the high schools are forced to, report or enforce, these deportation edicts, what happens to the students who are on this, go to college for free program at community college? And that is way up in the air right now. So that's one of my concerns. That's part of why I'm here. my other concern is that aside from teaching, I spent a lot of years interpreting and translating for Russian speakers from at one time the Soviet Union and then from the various republics that split off and became independent of the Soviet Union. So I worked with what was originally called the Vermont Refugee Resettlement Program. It's morphed through, you know, I don't even remember what the name is now, but I helped develop interpreter training and for both potential interpreters, native speakers, and also worked with the courts and with the hospital and various health agencies to train their professionals to work with interpreters. Okay, so and I don't know where that stands now. It's been a while since I worked with them. But I am wondering about what former refugee resettlement program, which is in the same place in Colchester. You know, same place, different name.
Yeah, USCRI.
Yeah, what they are doing now. Because I tried to call them and find out about that. But and finally, this is my little hobby horse. Beware of Google Translate. Really, you know, having I've interpreted in court. I've interpreted to the court system of WebEx. I've been in court when telephone interpreting has been used. I've interpreted in a couple of prisons. A lot of times St. Albans.
Talk just a little louder. Jane, can you talk a little bit louder?
Louder?
Yeah.
Okay.
People on
Okay.
Zoom can't
Many
hear you.
trips to St. Albans. Okay. To the jail, right? And I know there are always questions of whether you know, interpreters in the court system should be absolutely neutral. That's the idea, okay? But there's a whole spectrum of advocacy in interpreting and then absolute neutrality, as if we were, you know, human takers, whatever. It depends on the situation. But what I do want to say is really, despite the advances in AI and in, you know, translation, machine translation, it's a long way from being perfect. And, you know, I occasionally use Google Translate to look up a particular phrase, but I've seen some real howlers that can be absolutely misleading. Okay. And this, you know, this goes from any kind of closed caption translation or something, or in real situation. So I would be very careful. I mean, there's the human factor. We are all, you know, we have our own biases, but a professional trained interpreter is aware of those. And frankly, I would rather have a human translate for me rather than rely on some bot.
Yep.
Okay, so that's it.
I've been asked to repeat questions. I don't think I'm gonna be able to repeat all of that. All of it very interesting, and the last point, Matt, I think you wanna.
Yeah, so I think the last point was really bringing forward the use of technology and interpretation services compared to a human being utilized. We still, for anything that is going to a court system, anything that's going through criminal processing, we will still use a in-person or telephone certified translator services. My point about the Google Translate type services or the AI services is more for the in the moment roadside. I need to talk to somebody about what's happening right this second, just to get the gist of. We need to get to a point where we bring in a translator. Like it might be that 5-minute conversation that we can have.
I could make one comment on that. I also work with the Burlington Police Department, not so much interpreting for them, but interpreting for visiting police groups, Russian speaking police groups. And at one time they were trying to, they had a system, sort of, you know, I mean, like early cell phones that had some sort of program in them so that they could press a button and there was a list of phrases, that they could use. And it was somewhat successful, but I think, they eventually abandoned it. But this was probably 2 years ago, so I don't know.
Thank you very much, Jane. Much appreciated. I just wanted to check in to see if there's any chat questions on the Zoom at this point.
Answered the one that was asked, you
Okay.
answered it.
Patty.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask Will, you didn't mention, and I'd like to learn more about the Milk with Dignity program that you guys are doing. What is that about? Could you just explain that to us? Like, what are you trying to have Hannaford's do exactly?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Happy to speak about it. So as I said at the outset, the majority of migrant justice's membership, and certainly the largest group of undocumented immigrants in the state, are those who are living and working on dairy farms. The vast majority of milkers in Vermont are immigrant workers, and the vast majority of them are undocumented. Vermont's dairy industry, to put it candidly, relies on the labor of undocumented workers, primarily people coming from southern Mexico and Central America. The labor and housing conditions in the Vermont dairy industry can be characterized as one of systemic human rights violations. 87% of immigrant dairy workers in the state are making below the state minimum wage. The median hourly wage is about $3 an hour lower than Vermont's minimum. Half of workers are working 12 hours or more a day, 60 to 80 hours a week. A quarter of workers are working 7 days a week without a break ever. Astronomical rates of workplace-related injury and illness, rampant sexual harassment, gender discrimination, retaliation, and even violence against workers. Housing is oftentimes substandard and sometimes really downright inhumane. So there are these systemic issues, and when Migrant Justice was first founded, like many different workers' organizations, tried to organize workers farm by farm to improve conditions, to address those violations, and it had some success, but it was quite limited. Until workers began to engage in deeper analysis and study into thinking through what are the driving causes or the root causes for these systemic issues, and adopted a supply chain analysis, supply chain approach that when you look at why are conditions the way they are in the dairy industry, it's not enough just to look at the relationship between the farm owner and the farm worker. You have to look at how is this industry structured economically through corporate supply chains. And so is corporate consolidation at the top of the dairy industry that was pushing down prices and then creating a downward pressure for wages and working conditions. And so Migrant Justice created this approach called Milk with Dignity to bring together all the actors in the supply chain, from farm workers to farm owners to the companies that are buying the milk. And through a collaborative approach, said that companies at the top of the supply chain can commit to sourcing from farms that are respecting workers' human rights, to pay those farms a premium to be used towards the cost of compliance with a worker-authored code of conduct, setting standards for labor and housing conditions. And the Milk with Dignity program launched with Ben & Jerry's as the first participating buyer, 2018. The program covers about 20% of Vermont's dairy industry. Dozens of farms and hundreds of farm workers are now covered and their rights are protected by the program. And the difference is really night and day. When you look at farms that are in the program, workers' rights are respected, pay is vastly higher, workers have benefits that many of us would take for granted, but things like paid sick leave, vacation, holiday pay that just don't exist on farms outside of the program. So vast improvements are underway, but it's still just a start. So most farms in the state are not enrolled in the program, and workers don't have those protections. So after getting Ben & Jerry's in, workers have sought to expand the program by inviting other companies to follow in Better Jerry's footsteps, to sign milk with dignity agreements and to reform their dairy sourcing practices. And the big public target right now is, as you mentioned, is Hannaford Supermarket. They're the largest grocery chain in northern New England, one of the largest buyers of dairy throughout the Northeast. And so their entrance into the program would have huge ramifications for transforming the dairy industry in Vermont and beyond. Hannaford has been very resistant to taking responsibility for the conditions in their supply chain. They've offered many false solutions to try to trick consumers into thinking that they are exercising due diligence when in fact the reverse is true. So it's been a very hard fought campaign. On May Day, there was a full day picket of Hannaford nearby in Williston, workers holding a picket line and encouraging consumers not to shop at the store, to withhold their purchasing in solidarity with what was called for human rights. And hundreds of consumers responded. We haven't published this yet, but customer count at Hannaford dropped by about 30% on May Day. So a huge impact on the and this pressure is having an impact. They've yet to sign, but for the first time in 5 years of campaigning, Hannaford sat down with Migrant Justice for an initial meeting, and they've recently announced an independent human rights impact assessment of conditions in their dairy supply chain. So these are very important steps. They're just initial steps, and workers aren't celebrating until the ink is dry on a milk with dignity contract. But we're starting to see Hannaford budge, and I'll just take the opportunity to point out the Hannaford spokesperson a couple weeks ago gave a public statement expressing appreciation for Migrant Justice for raising these issues and saying, frankly, in retrospect, we thank Migrant Justice for bringing these issues to light. So the appreciation is well noted, but much more than appreciation, workers want a milk with dignity with Hannaford Supermarket.
Got two questions here. I'm going to go to this side of the room first.
I'm Justin. I just wanted to know if you guys had recommendations for interacting, if required, with federal agents in such a way that would be most supportive of vulnerable members of our community, whether you were vulnerable or not. We'll just speak to that. Yeah.
Can you repeat it?
So the question is, do the panelists have any recommendations for how individuals in the community might interact with federal law enforcement, DHS or ICE, should they come into contact with and be asked questions about someone who might be undocumented or under question?
Yeah, I think one of the really great models that exists out there comes out of Chicago. Chicago has, for the past 20+ years, really done a great job of training communities of how to respond in these situations, even before it got to this state. I know that Ed Justice Coalition, Winooski, a couple of places have started to try to offer those community trainings. But in the meantime, until they exist on a broader scale here, which is something that this organization could host in theory, in the meantime, I'd recommend just looking up the videos of how to respond in these situations. Like I said, there's really great ones out of the city of Chicago, and just understand your rights and what you can and can't do, and that, you know, people cannot come into a house without a warrant signed by a judge. You can know, like, there's some great videos out there of people who in the community have surrounded vehicles until ICE has left, and then the family can safely get into the house. So it's one of those things where, like, social media is super helpful right now to just access these trainings and access videos of how it is successful in other places. We do, like, I don't know Will's opinion on this and what he's, but basically, like, we need more trainings in our communities so that people do know how to do this. And there's just, because in a lot of ways so new to Vermont. We just haven't gotten there, but models exist and community trainings could happen.
The Palestinians arrest, the Palestinian Solidarity Group, all the training will do, which is don't talk to the agent before your lawyer standing. It doesn't work when they coming with masks. They refuse to tell who are they. You saw the video with Romaiza, you know, she thought she's kidnapped by regular people. They refuse to say what kind of forces they are, you know. And not it didn't go like this. They moved her from the state where she's living in through New Hampshire, brought her to Vermont, flying her within less than 24 hours to Louisiana. With Mohsen Mahdawi, they baited him. He did the test. He passed the test. He signed that he's citizen. He swore to be an American. Wait a minute. They brought people, they are masked, they took him, you know, it's kidnapping, you know, and not take him direct to St. Albans. It didn't happen like that. They took him to the airport. It was coincident, 9 minutes on the flight that was late or flew before arrival that we kept him here. We were lucky to keep him here in Vermont. So these kind of forces, you know, is out of whack. You know, the Constitution is no longer exists for them. You know, when people, I mean, listen, we are living on a time, the First Amendment, right, doesn't exist, which is it's number one, it's the First Amendment. So for chunk of people, Palestinian or Palestinian solidarity groups, it doesn't exist for those forces. By the way, I want to bring it up. This is not the first time my community suffered from it. Post 9/11, it was the same, and many people got arrested. But the problem then, we didn't make any noise because 91% of the American, they supported all that kind of hatred to Islam and Muslims and Arab or people with a name like mine, you know? And this is still existed. And this is where racism and discrimination, you know, it comes in different form. We live it every day. But the Constitution doesn't protect everybody. Otherization exists, you know, and this is what we live here in the United States, you know. But we have a lot of people like the migrants, Black and brown people, the indigenous, the LGBTQ, all these, you know, groups of people and communities, they suffered like we are suffering now. And now we're becoming as a one family community.
Use your privilege. Like, I'm loud and obnoxious and a troublemaker. And when you watch that video of her being arrested, no one says anything. No one steps in. Like, use your privilege. Like, most of you in this room have a large degree of privilege. Use it. What's going to happen to you? You're going to get yelled at, you get arrested, and you get bonded out. Like, we're not the ones who are going to face being shipped somewhere else. So just be loud and annoying, because when you cause a scene, it's problematic for everyone involved. Cause a scene if you're protected, which looking around this room, a lot of you are.
I would say at the very least, film.
Yeah.
Because I think we've seen movement on some of, you know, once the public sees what we're, you know, what's happening, because we all have phones and cameras in our pockets. You know, get it out there.
Just to make this point off of that comment, one of the things that I think has become quite apparent in the recent days of Vermonters being involved in deportations is that when you know someone, when you can really put a face and a relationship to a person who is being threatened with deportation or is being deported, it makes a big difference. We have a really hard time, at least in our culture, with connecting to people we don't actually know personally. It's easy to other than it's easy to say it's somebody else's problem. When we have video, when we see something actually happening, when we recognize that this is just a person who was just going about her business, and people who do not identify themselves, who are masked, it's a very different, it's very different. Laws are laws. Laws need to be respected until they're changed. And when someone is displaying law enforcement, one knows that it's law enforcement. When someone is in disguise, it's hard to take that as anything other than a threat.
Don't be a bystander.
Don't be a bystander.
Can I pivot off a little bit of that? Law enforcement side, okay? If you're seeing somebody and something you see is wrong, call 911. Like if you're out in public and you see people with masks taking somebody, call 911. 911, our dispatchers are really good about finding out the information if that was a legitimate law enforcement exercise or deportation or arrest, or if this was something that is not right and you're now the witness, you can come forward and bring attention to the problem. And when that attention gets brought, you could save end of someone's life. It could actually be someone mimicking a federal agent, what they've done to kidnap somebody else. So if you see something, call 911. Don't be afraid to pick up your phone and call and report it. That other said, if you're interacting with me and in uniform, please know who I am. Please give me give me some respect and some cooperation. But ask me. One of the things I tell people, if you're interacting with law enforcement, we're supposed to be telling you if it is or not required of you to do it. So ask me, are you ordering me to do this? If I am, you do have to comply with the order and then fight me in court that my order was not unlawful. But I don't want you guys actually fighting on the side of the road over something that we could not use force on. We can issue this in the courtroom where these things should be decided.
I'll just add on that briefly. Yeah, I mean, to your question, in interactions with federal immigration agents, unlike with most interactions with law enforcement in Vermont, people are not required to identify themselves or answer questions. And so we do recommend in most cases when people are interacting with ICE or Border Patrol to exercise the right to remain silent and to exercise your Fourth Amendment privileges against unreasonable search and seizure. There are distinctions in what the law requires in interactions with a municipal police agency versus ICE or Border Patrol. Most of the immigration arrests in Vermont historically have been achieved through what are known in the sort of Orwellian language as consensual encounters. Basically Border Patrol will approach people or in a supermarket parking lot when they hear them speaking Spanish, or they'll pull over a car of people with brown skin and begin to interrogate them. And it's only through people's own admissions of being foreign nationals or own admissions of what ICE or Border Patrol refer to as their potential deportability that the federal agents have the probable cause or the lawful reason to detain them, because we aren't talking about criminal procedures here. Deportation is a civil procedure, and so we certainly do encourage in our discussions with people who could be at risk of deportation not to provide ICE or Border Patrol with the probable cause that's needed to detain them and initiate removal proceedings. Case by case, there are a lot of intricacies. Obviously, the way that Mohsen was arrested in the targeted fashion in which he was, it's very different than the way that a farm worker would be arrested when they're pulled over by Border Patrol on the side of the road, when ICE or Border Patrol already knows who you are and has your information. Refusing to identify yourself isn't going to do all that much. But in general, we would say, remain silent, don't provide ICE or Border Patrol with information needed to detain you.
Mohsen talked to me 13 days before he got arrested. He told me he's coming to Vermont because he goes to Columbia. He's graduating in 2 weeks. So, what do you think? He asked me. I said, because he's scared. He's in hiding, and Columbia is not protecting him. I said, if they wanna arrest you, they would find you and arrest you if you are that. Must be, it's a time, and his lawyer too said it's a time that you will receive a letter to do the test. But he was smart enough to call all the federal, our representative, everyone, including his local representative, like Becca White and others, and they went and they witnessed. They are not talking, oh, pro-Palestine or against Palestine. They saw what happened in front of them. It's a fact. And many times we talk about this story happening to us all through our history. Nobody will believe it, nobody will touch it. Now it is on video. We're living it, but it has been happening to us for years, The only thing we ask the public to take responsibility. Take responsibility. You have a criminal on the top. You have Marco Rubio, he's a criminal, he's a liar. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So the list of those organizations, and here I'm afraid of organizations organized here, Shalom Alliance, they are lobbyist group, they living within our community. But those with Canary Mission, with Bitar, taking our photos, pictures, calling us terrorists and weaponizing anti-Semitism is terrifying to our students. That's why we are trying to pass a resolution over protecting the First Amendment rights to be protected. We are going to talk to the mayor of Burlington, not to send her police, or aiding the police when they come to UVM or to Champlain College. We're going to go to Winooski because St. Michael's. In Middlebury, we've already started the process because the colleges are not protected. They need the money. So whatever the federal government enforcing on them to change the definition of anti-Semitism, they are taking it because it's equal millions and millions of them. This is the sad story. This is the sad story. So all these colleges you respect, Ivy League, don't respect them anymore because they can sell your children at any moment.
You had a question.
I did, yes.
You still have a question.
I still have a question. It's for Will. I'm curious, Will, what you know about our local farms in terms of working conditions in our local community. Are they signed on to, just I'm curious about that.
The question is for Will and what do you know about the conditions on local farms in Vermont relative to farm
Like
workers?
local.
Local, like
Yeah.
Richmond
Yeah,
local.
Richmond, Huntington, Heinsberg.
We happen to have, we do happen to have a farmer here.
About dairy farms for migrant justice or what?
Let's-
The other farms?
I guess farms that are employing migrant workers in general, right? But it seems its initial was dairy farms. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we generally won't comment about conditions on a particular farm. There are times when farm workers themselves will provide testimony and name the farms that they're working on. But I won't get into the details in any particular farm. I will say that in the sort of Richmond, Huntington area, some farms are enrolled in the Milk with Dignity program, some farms are not.
We've got three going here. I'm gonna go to Beth first.
Beth, I own Maple Wind Farm and for the last, well, this will be our fourth season, we are part of the H2A program, which is different. We do not hire migrant labor, we hire agricultural workers. And it's through the government, they have different visa where we only hire them temporarily for a 6-month stay. We have a lot of boxes to check. And so you know, the Department of Labor comes and looks at where they're going to be staying, so there's oversight there, if anybody wasn't aware of that. So I can't just put them in a room with, you know, 5 bunk beds. We found a place for them where they have 50 square feet per person for their living accommodations. There's all these, I have to pay market rate for apartments in the area wherever I can find them. Unfortunately, we don't have worker housing on my farm at this point. We can't afford to build something. So we're in a little bit of a hard place on that. So we have to go out to the market and pay market rate. But we love these guys. They're part of our family. They'll be here hopefully in the next couple weeks, and they stay working for us through Thanksgiving. If you live in the community, you might have even bumped into them at the store because they live right on Church Street last year. They're wonderful, and they're very appreciative of having the work. So I won't go more into that, but that's our situation at our farm. We work with the agricultural visa program. My question was, I'm worried because there's gonna be 5 brown guys driving around in my VW all summer, and they might be pulled over. And so I wanna make sure that they have the proper identification. You know, I don't want them to get nervous. Do you have any recommendations of what they should have with them? Basically, if they're gonna go into the Richmond market, you know, wherever they go, I want them to have the proper, you know, something to pull out of their wallet or out of their backpack. You know, it's just awful that people are being, I know of 2 women that work for the Department of Labor who are from Mexico, and they got pulled over by ICE, and they were detained for a half an hour until they could get a hold of their supervisors to let them go.
So Beth, let me see if I get the question right.
These
The
people
question is, what can farm workers who are here lawfully on H-2A visas
Yeah,
do to protect themselves in terms of carrying the appropriate documentation
thank you.
and anything else that they need to ensure that they are treated fairly?
I
while they're
can
here?
answer the local part. I don't know about the federal part. But the local side, we will accept any form of identification, including them just telling us their name and date of birth, as long as we can back and verify who they are. So as long as we can verify if, let's say they have a non-driver ID from the state of California, and but they don't have it physically on them, I can still query the state of California and get that return saying, yes, this is, you know, Joe Smith from the state of California with the same date of birth, and verify that, and I'll take them at their word, that's who they are. And then I can continue my local paperwork with their, basically just telling me who they are.
You don't have access to information in Costa Rica.
No, I do not. But I would take them at their word of who they are and utilize our video surveillance systems like body cameras. If something that they didn't show up for a court hearing and didn't do their process they're supposed to do, we would then put out their picture from my body camera to further identify them at that point, but not prior to. Like if it's like I'm on the side of the road, I'm interacting with somebody for driving a car, and even though if they have a valid license, that they're just gonna give me they can just give me their name, date of birth, and I can query that information. And if they don't have a valid license, I need to do enforcement action. I can use what they've given me for that enforcement action. I don't have to go further. I don't have to keep adding and going further and down the rabbit hole of identification.
Guess it's for really an ICE stuff.
Yes, the ICE stuff part.
Could I
Yeah.
also interject? Because I do work at a community justice center, and we have this very situation that you're talking about. And one of the things we've advised some of the clients and cases that we've worked with is to have an information card with them at all times, whether it's in the car or in their pocket, that explains who they are, where they live, who their contact is. And, you know, to that kind of information that would help any officer or any person that's stopping them to help mediate that situation so that they're not, taken away, in a way that where they can't get a hold of someone.
I could write them a letter.
So the
Just even a card, like, there's a 3x5 card that says, it's my name, this is my primary language, my first language. This is where I live, this is my phone number, these are my contact people, just have that kind of information on them at all times. It's worked, it's been very helpful in certain cases.
So the suggestion is to have a card made up that says who the person is, where they're residing, for what purpose, and a contact. And their primary language, which would be helpful for translation certainly as well. Thank you.
I just wanted to add that I'm from Jay. I work at a few shops down the street. We have a big box of red cards, which I have in English and on one side and Spanish on the other. And it's like, I don't know, maybe someone could describe it better than I, but like it's a mini like know your rights, and I don't have to speak to you, but you can just kind of hand it to a federal agent if that was to happen. Like,
You can Google red card.
yeah, but I have a lot. I just or handing them out. But the first, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but just coming back, Will's suggestion, one of the suggestions was knowing the right to not say anything is a good one to know.
Yeah, I mean, which is that's what the red cards do. We have a sort of local version of that will have an emergency hotline for migrant justice that people can call to get a local response. So we do encourage local institutions to use the local version rather than the red card. And I'm happy to provide you with some. Generally we have not seen risk of detention to H-2A workers in the past couple months. Not to say that it couldn't happen, but there haven't been reports that we know of ICE wrongly arresting an H-2A worker. In general, I think the sort of Fourth Amendment protections and right to remain silent still stand. But we would encourage them to have not the original on them, but take a picture with their cell phone of their H-2A visa. If they're pulled over by ICE or Border Patrol, and it seems like they will be detained, showing that should clear things up if they have a valid unexpired H-2A visa.
I'm just going to interject here. We're at about 8:10, and we're supposed to be finishing up at 8. I know Alexis had a question. I saw Lisa's got a question. At the risk of being considerably longer than we're supposed to be already. Alexis, you have a question?
Yeah, so question for you, Will, is I'm wondering how the fear of deportation right now might be impacting the activism around the Note with Dignity, and both for the farm workers. Is there increased fear of them like being activists, and then for those of us who want to advocate in solidarity, do we need to worry about drawing attention to the migrant workers here?
Yeah, great question. And so the question is increased fear of deportation. How is that affecting activism? And then what's the role of people who aren't at risk of deportation? Certainly there is increased fear right now, absolutely, and especially after the Border Patrol arrest in the Franklin County farm. People are terrorized. And at the same time, I think it's very important to note and to lift up that people are conquering that fear to continue to speak out and defend their rights. And overwhelmingly, what migrant justice is hearing from its membership is a message of resistance and resilience, that people are not willing to go back into the shadows. They're not willing to give up the rights and protections that they've won over 15 years of fighting in Vermont. They are here to stay, and they're here to fight. People have put down roots, have made Vermont their second home, and they aren't going anywhere. So we've seen that over the past couple of months, and in particular in the past couple of weeks, as farm workers led a march on Church Street to denounce these arrests. They led a march in Williston and the picket of Hannaford. Yes. People are continuing to very courageously speak out and are not going away. And at the same time, I think that's a call for the rest of us to step up too. I think it would be very hard for me or many of us here to sort of match the bravery of the migrant justice community, given that the stakes are much lower for me as they are for many of you. But I take that as a call to action and a call to increase our commitment to standing in solidarity with those who are bravely putting themselves at risk to stand up for their rights, because at the end of the day, their rights are our rights.
Yes, so.
Thank you.
One more question?
And just, I would like to say that people can go to the Richmond Racial Equity website. We will be posting what, there are 2 films, I think, what you are wanting to promote that people might want to see to further educate themselves. Will you have a QR code where people can sign a petition and so forth? And so you will be able to find by the end of the week some of the things that you've been hearing about and things that people would like you to do.
So I'd like to just do one last question, Lisa, if you still have your question.
Sure. Question for Will. You may have answered it sort of, but a while ago you talked about forward-thinking employers like Ben and Jerry's, for example, protecting their migrant workers. And I'm not sure you went in much more detail at that point, but how do those workers access that? How do they exercise it then, in the field? How do they, does Ben and Jerry's have a hotline or, I was wondering what form that takes. Well, not just great that they do that. And
Sure.
It's a big source of support for those people. So I'd like to know a little more if you have.
Yeah, so the question and interpreting it a little bit is sort of how does the Milk with Dignity program work? How do workers access their rights in the program? And one terminology piece is that Ben & Jerry's isn't an employer of the farm workers. Rather, they have a supply chain relationship. So they're buying from farms, which in turn are employing workers. So when a farm enters the Milk with Dignity program, the farm is committing to abide by the standards set forth in a worker-authored code of conduct. Migrant Justice goes onto the farm to conduct regular education sessions to bring the employers and employees together and talk about what those new standards are and clarify the expectations so everybody knows what the wages and what the conditions should be. And then the farm also is subject to monitoring and enforcement by an independent nonprofit that was created by Migrant Justice for this purpose, called the Milk with Dignity Standards Council. So that's a body of investigators who staff a 24-hour hotline that all workers in the program have access to, and that regularly audits farms in the program to do worksite inspections, housing inspections, payroll review, interviews with management and with workers, to address the areas where farms are not yet in compliance with the code of conduct and to sort of foster a collaborative environment where workers and employers together are addressing those issues through corrective action plans. And it's been remarkably successful. These are, it's really about changing deeply entrenched imbalances in power and writing a new story. And we mentioned like farm workers called this program Milk with Dignity, not milk with 5 paid sick days or milk at this wage. It's more than just the material benefits. So those are incredibly important. But it's about changing the relationship that people have to each other, changing the nature of dairy work, taking work that's been characterized by marginalization and exclusion and discrimination and exploitation, and making this work such where people's dignity as human beings is respected.
Is the existence of that known to ICE and so forth? I imagine it is, but do they acknowledge that? Or pretend it doesn't exist?
Yeah, no, I mean, the program is public. The list of participating farms is not public, which is one of the reasons I was a little cagey on that answer previously. But I think, an additional piece that's we like to talk about is that this is a program that was created by immigrant workers, but in its implementation benefits not only immigrant dairy workers, but also US-born dairy workers. While immigrants are the majority of the dairy workforce, there are people born and raised in Vermont who are milking and feeding cows side by side with those from Mexico and Guatemala, and they're seeing pay increases, they're seeing protection against sexual harassment, they're seeing increased benefits as well. So a farmer's participation in Milk with Dignity is not necessarily an admission of the demographics or the immigration status of its workforce. It's something that benefits everyone.
So I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. We are over time. I'm going to wrap it up here. I want to thank Richmond Racial Equity for hosting this, and I want to remind everyone to fill out surveys that you got when you came in, and say that there is hot water and tea and that sort of thing, cookies and some oranges and things, and people are welcome to stick around and chat for a while. So thank you all very much for being here. Thank you all.